I'm Jane Tan. I grew up in the UK and I have my families on my father's side are from near Seramban in Malaysia. And so I'm partly through that heritage, I was talking with Yin Yin, another artist who's currently showing in the same exhibition. And we bonded over a lot of our shared like misunderstandings maybe, or gaps in our relative like ancestry stories. And then also some of those gaps we have in common, if that makes sense. So when they invited me to do the exhibition here, I was really excited. And we've been friends for a long time and kind of compare different notes about what it feels like to be like somewhat distant from different parts of your family narratives. Then the work that I make in general, it features a lot of kinetics. I think from even just being a young child, I really liked things that have a lot of energy and dynamics. And I love kind of basic DIY forms of engineering. So I used to make a lot of things when I was younger at home and before I became an artist or thought that was possible. So a lot of the stuff that I make comes about from maybe the kind of headspace of being bored at home. There's something about the leftovers of these things that I find really beautiful. And then there's ways in which you can do a kind of parallel jump to the bottom dregs of your jewelry box or something. So there are lots of different pockets and corners in domestic spaces that seem to breed or grow artwork by themselves in a way. So I make a lot of videos with my phone and I might film some of these experiments, and then they feature and I add another form of like aesthetic rubble, I call it, which is like the leftover bits of decoration. They are the official forms of grammatical ornamentation. Lots of people ask me why I have so much kinetic stuff in the work, and fundamentally it's just because I like it. It's not that complicated, but there's a certain amount of energy transfer that I ultimately find mystifying. Like, where does it come from? Like, energy never seems to go away. It just transfers from one form to another. So it's always in the universe, right? And the thing I like about something like simple kinetics is that there's a certain amount of intuition. You feel like you can understand how something is moving. You can't see wind, but you can feel it and you know what it is. And there's something you can understand about how then you can imagine air currents, for example. So there's a certain amount of the illustrativeness and the practicality and the very tangible idea about what energy transfer is that makes, and at the same time, it's kind of magic because it's invisible. So that's why pinwheels are so great. I think that's part of the why that kids like them as well. The reason that they're legs is because they come again from one of my favorite characters from Kung Fu Hustle. And there's this part where the running of the legs turns into a spinning wheel of energy. And then she kind of zooms off and like down the road after Stephen Chow, which is like, who wouldn't run after Stephen Chow? The fans are driven by other fans. So the electricity from these fans is actually the thing that is powering the pinwheels. It's not wind. And which means that ultimately they are not in control, and the air in the world is not in control of how they spin, and they will have to keep spinning perpetually depending on what happens with the original fans. Periscopes are another very intuitive, mechanical way of a form of engineering. At this time, instead of wind, there's light. And so I like the idea that, again, there's kind of a tool that's also sometimes a toy. It's positioned in a way that promises you to be able to like see somewhere that you wouldn't be able to physically see with your eyes. Hannah Arendt has written about like the invention of lenses and other kinds of optics with glass, which are fundamental paradigm shifts of like civilization, whatever. But she talks about telescopes and microscopes of like really physically shifting our perspective of ourselves in the world. So as soon as you can see the microscopic and the macroscopic, you kind of can imagine your physicality of your humanness in other places outside of your actual location. So when you look at a periscope, your eye kind of transports to another level or another position. And it happens kind of simultaneously to where you actually are in time and space. So it's kind of like time travel almost. When you look through these mirrors, they're all vintage, like I'm gonna say Asian mirrors. It's like I find them on eBay mostly, and they're all advertised as like vintage Chinese, vintage blah blah blah, and they're overpriced pocket mirrors that are kind of plastic, romanticized something or other. And then spam is classic. So there's this one just happens to be a spam mirror, and there are other kind of flowery ones downstairs. And when you look through the periscopes, you can kind of, at the moment, they're positioned to look at some of the figurines that I made, but they can look at anything. And then this one happens to be looking at the amazing Kelly Tan, who's a Malaysian golfer, and one of my dad's suggestions about who I should put in artwork. So this is a homage. This is a homage for my father, who's an avid golf fan, and the figurines are all different people who I find have like an interesting relationship to a public or and their professional activity. So they are all people who do something that I think is kind of an interesting job. Who might be famous in their own fields, but might not necessarily be famous like globally, like the other movie stars that I was interested in.
My name is Yin Yin Wong, and for this show I'm mainly presenting a performance piece called Song for a Hungry Ghost. And alongside of that, in the exhibition, the duo exhibition with Jay Tan, I am presenting a few lightbox pieces and a drawing. Some of the light boxes are sort of performance set pieces, or they set the scene for the performance, but I like to think of them as a self-standing work as well. The light boxes, they embody different themes that are present in my body of work. Themes that are about masculinity, spirituality, cross-cultural divination, or cross-cultural divinity. Like the title Song for a Ghost sort of alludes to, it's cross-pollinating from different cultural scripts, cultural heritages. And some works, they refer to the lives and dreams and maybe ambitions and iconography of people living in the diaspora or people living in service industry, as my family was in the service industry and was operating in a small Malaysian Chinese diaspora in the Netherlands. And I grew up in their restaurant, which is what the performance piece is mostly about. And I would say the rest of the work presented are pieces that in some way relate to the themes that are also in the performance. Well, I grew up watching Bruce Lee. For one, like my dad used to show me Bruce Lee movies and play his action sequences in slow motion because Bruce Lee moved so fast that you couldn't catch him in a punch with the naked eye, and I thought that was really cool. Returning back to this image of Bruce Lee as an adult, I see and appreciate what he brought to the West, because his in Western society, Asian masculinity is seen in quite a negative or depreciated light. So generally Asian men, and with this in the West, when people speak of Asian men, they mostly speak of East Asian or East Asian men, people with a Chinese or Korean appearance. Korea is not East Asia, sorry. In the West, when they speak of Asian men, they usually think of East Asian people who look Chinese, for instance. And they are mostly seen as effeminate, unthreatening, or dangerous and, you know, sneaky, but never as attractive or you know, yeah, like masculine in a classical way as perceived in the West. And I like how, in retrospect, Bruce Lee represented sort of like an antithesis of this preconceived notion of Asian masculinity. He was such a strong force in his philosophy, in his art, in his martial art, that people couldn't really get around, you know, like his charisma and his influence. And I feel, or in his time, he was also not fully recognized for what he brought to the cinematic industry in the USA. A lot of his ideas were stolen. He was also looked down upon a bit by the industry. He had to fight real hard to get somewhere, and he passed before like he really flourished, I feel, or like he wasn't then the icon that we perceive of him as now. And I see in him like one of the few sort of anchors in Western society that, you know, like was something to hold on to as a kid growing up, as a kid, you know, looking for maybe masculine role models. I wanted to bring that back into the space because like the performance is also about masculinity, or my relationship to masculinity, flawed masculinity, or, you know, like maybe even a toxic masculinity. And I think bringing the likes of Bruce Lee, and in the performance also Jean-Claude Van Damme on a billboard into the frame plays with, yeah, these role models from the 80s and 90s.